So I'm here today to talk to you about something that, once again, I actually really don't want to talk to you about, but it's important. And that's the fact that Canada has a problem with a loophole in its legislation around bestiality. I'm joined today by my good friend and colleague Barry Miller, who serves with me as my legislative manager here in Ottawa. And Barry, you've done a lot of work on this issue. Can you explain to people exactly what the problem is?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2016, the Supreme Court had a very disturbing case before them. They had to look at an issue of child abuse, which was also met with animal abuse. They had pressed a bestiality charge against him, but ultimately that charge was dismissed because basically they made it a very narrow interpretation of what bestiality was.
Yes.
And in this case, it was excused, but it was fairly disturbing. And now we would say there's a bit of a loophole, or there is not a way to actually prosecute bestiality right now.
So just to build on what Barry's saying and not saying, is that the loophole that happened in this case was that the defendant had smeared peanut butter on his daughter's genitals and was not convicted of bestiality because in Canada, bestiality is only defined as a penetrative act. So sometimes, I've raised this with you many times, I've had people write into the office we've seen and say, well, why are you talking about this? This isn't a problem in Canada. Well, first, this case clearly shows that it is. And I think there's a couple of other points. First of all, that's that there are other cases that are before appellate courts. Yes. At this point in time. The Supreme Court basically said it was Parliament's job to close this loophole. Mm-hmm. We've been asking the government to close this loophole. It would take a very simple legislative fix for over a year. We have a bill in front of the House. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But Barry, do you want to speak a little bit about the intersection here between animal rights as well as, you know, it being abuse towards animal being a predicator towards future violent crime, and why this is also an impetus to close this loophole?
Right, exactly. Well, so just like the case that we were just talking about in 2016, it showed pretty gruesomely the connection between child abuse and animal abuse. Often we find that these things can be linked. There's been a lot of research on this. They call it the violence link. But there also appears to be a link between domestic violence and animal violence. It's a precursor almost to escalation of violence. We know that sometimes it starts with animals and then it escalates. So that, I think, should give us impetus to want to address the root causes or address it where it's starting.
And frankly, again, I tabled a bill in the House of Commons in December. Barry helped me out with that, as well as many civil society organizations. I'll give a shout out to Animal Justice here, who have been raising this issue. For those of you who don't, follow Parliament regularly, this is something that probably could have been pushed through the House of Commons with unanimous consent. The government could have introduced some legislation on this, and they haven't done that yet. So it's very frustrating to watch this happen for something I think that the government would get unanimous consent on. They're prioritizing everything other than this in the House of Commons, which is why we need your help. We have started a petition after all of this time to get the government to close this loophole. I would like to think this is a nonpartisan issue. So if you're watching this, you don't have to agree with my political flavor, but let's agree that this is something that's in the best interest of all Canadians, and also from the perspective of animal welfare. So Barry, do you want to talk about the petition and how people can help us with that?
Sure. So we'll put a link to the petition in the description. If you can go on there, it takes just a few seconds to sign that, and then Michelle will be able to table that in the House. It's calling on the government to take action because they've delayed so long, and we know that there's currently cases before the court. So if you can give us some help by signing, that would be great.
And petitions do make a difference. Many of you have signed petitions that I've put forward where we've actually seen the government change policy. I won't bore you with all of those examples, although maybe we should do a video in the future, but your input on this really matters. So look in the description of this video. If you're watching from Facebook, it'll be in the title. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the description of the video. Click that link. Please sign this petition and share it with friends. This should be a nonpartisan issue. This is in the best interest of all Canadians. And yes, in fact, it is happening here in Canada. It's very negative, and it's something that really should take no time for the government to fix whatsoever, at the direction of the Supreme Court. Anyway, we're working hard for you here in Ottawa. Please sign that petition. Have a great day.